Hi, Homeworthy. I'm Michael.
I'm Thomas. Welcome to our home in Virginia. Please come on in.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story. Before today's episode, click the join button below to support all of the storytelling we do on this channel. Our growing community of members help to directly fund more videos so we can capture these extraordinary homes from around the world. So join today to receive early and exclusive access to new Homeworthy videos.
Hi, I'm Michael Devine, and I'm a textile designer.
And I'm Thomas Burak. I'm an interior designer.
And we're in our home in Orange, Virginia, which is in central Virginia, a land of rolling hills and horse farms. We ended up in Orange. We had been looking desperately for 2.5 years in northwestern Connecticut and Millbrook, New York. And after 2 years of an unsuccessful search, to say the least, one night I was on Zillow, and I started on the eastern seaboard in Maine. With our criteria, and I came down state by state, and I ran out of states at Maryland. And I thought, oh, well, I'd been to Virginia once for a book signing when my book came out, and it was wonderful. And I thought, well, let's see what's going on in Virginia. And there was a house in Virginia, in Orange, not this one, but another one that got us here. And that's what got us here. So the answer would be Zillow. So the architectural style of the house was actually designed by a well-known Charlottesville architect named Milton Grigg. And he had worked on Monticello at Williamsburg and had done a number of houses in sort of the 1950s, I think, to about the 70s. And this house was built in 1950s. So it's very, it's a stone house. It's just a sort of Cape Cod style.
Welcome to our living room, which is painted a very dark gray. And the technique is lime wash, which gives the walls almost a suede-like finish. They're shaded. The color is called Caviar by Resource Paints. And I particularly like dark rooms at night. The walls seem to disappear. The colors jump from them at night. And we use a lot of candlelight in here also. And I think it gives a great mood to the room. All of the furniture came from previous our apartment in New York. And we'll start here with the banquette, which was in our dining room, which works perfectly in this corner of the room. And we chose this sort of rich gold and gray for the room so that it just has a richness to it. And these panels that I bought years ago at the flea market in Paris work perfectly and really kind of set the tone for the room. They were also used in our New York apartment in Gramercy. We have several things that are of interest. These are Fortuny fruits that I actually made myself. They're covered in Fortuny with vintage trim on a beautiful Italian tray table that we have. And over the years, we've collected many things like this that we purchased in Portugal. This came from Paris, and a lot of things that have a lot of meaning to us. A chair that I purchased in Italy. It's an Italian chair covered in a silk velvet. Particular interest in this room is this mirrored wall, which we actually inherited. And it's really 3 different panes that were all put together. And I think the original reason it was put in here was to give more reflection to the wall, or to the room, excuse me. But what we're looking at here is a collection of blue and white porcelains that we have collected over the years. Some of them actually were pieces that Michael collected before me and me before him. And the brackets that we used that we had some in Gramercy, we had some in the Country Place in Kinderhook, and just put all of the brackets up and to highlight all of the pieces. And some of them are vintage, some of them are newer pieces. And I particularly love the effect it gives, and particularly at night when you have the candles glowing and the chandelier and all the reflection in here just gives tremendous depth to the room. And I look at all of these pieces, and some of them are big and add drama. But I love particularly these little vases here that we did a grouping of 2 on each little bracket. They just have such a particular little charm about them versus just having the big pieces, which of course I love everything big and dramatic, but there's something wonderful about those 4 little vases. Of note in the room also is the mantle. The person that built the house collected a lot of salvage, and this came from a mansion in Richmond, which we think is really a spectacular piece, and the black and white tiles on the floor, and enhanced it with a beautiful French mirror that was bought in Paris years ago. These sconces that are sort of obstructed by the forsythia came from the DuPont mansion in Delaware. A collection of pillows that are varied. We have some Fortuny. We happen to have a particular love for Fortuny. This one is a vintage Fortuny pillow that was given to me by a friend, David Duncan, who's an antique dealer. And also, speaking of David Duncan, their Swedish chandelier came from his shop also. The chairs are covered in horsehair. It's an embroidery pattern, and when I designed this when I was creative director at Schumacher. So the fabric on here is from Schumacher. This is also a vintage Schumacher fabric that was in one of the collections I did for them. And we like a lot of antiques and mixing different styles. So we have Swedish. This particular piece is English, Victorian. It was actually the first piece of furniture I ever bought. This was even prior to Michael. I bought this at a sale and have had it ever since, wherever it's traveled with me. This is a Swedish desk. And we enhanced it with the hydrangeas, and I love doing these big arrangements. I think looking at the forsythia and looking at here, the things that are done in scale, that just have pizzazz to them, and these are hydrangeas that obviously have come from our property, and we just keep sticking them in there, and they dry beautifully, and from season to season we'll enhance and add a couple more or so forth. Throughout the room, which has a lot of formal furniture, we wanted to sort of tone it down with the rush on the floor, which gives it a little bit more casual country look. And this comes from a company called Rush House, and I really love the look of it. It just pulls everything down and makes it less complicated. We decorated this home to actually be our own personal style, very classic, traditional. We both love a lot of pattern, we love color, we love chintz, and we really made this very personal. We have many friends that come and love our home, and that's always a benefit. But I think anyone, and myself as a professional designer, feel you design your home to your own liking. We had many pieces of furniture that I'd collected over the years, and it all fit into this house beautifully. And all it did was we needed to do backgrounds and paint and wallpapering and so forth. And of course use a lot of Michael's fabrics in the house, which again give it such personal style.
But one of the great things about this house was it had been very well maintained over the years, so it really was what I call a paint and paper house. We didn't have to do massive renovations, which we had done both recently in New York and then also at our other country house up north. And that's just not our thing. We don't have a great fondness for tearing houses apart. It's great to do it for a client, but having lived through the horrors of the war twice, we didn't want to get involved in that again.
As you will notice, there are a lot of chairs in the room. Now, I have a passion for chairs. I could have a room just full of them. And what we like about the chairs that are various sizes and feelings is that they can be moved. This can be, this is an easy chair to move if someone wants a conversation group here or if people want to add to there. And what I love about them is that they're different styles, they're different finishes. Here, this little child's chair that we picked up in an antique shop actually was upholstered in this fabric, oddly enough, and it had double welt, which is a no-no in our book. So I took off the double welt and applied a gimp to the chair. This was a vintage chair that we bought, and this happens to be a Schumacher fabric that I was responsible for when I was at Schumacher. It is a vintage. I just happen to have enough of it to cover this chair. And we love the collection of chairs. I think they sort of tell a story. Who sat in them? How was this made? How was this designed? I think the Italian chair is of particular interest because if you look at the front of the chair, it's all decorated with white and gold. And this more than likely would have been placed against the wall because if you notice, the back has no gold. It's just plain. There's no carving on the legs and the back and the inside. So this would have been typically placed against the back of the wall. And a lot of things were done like that. Gold gilded candlesticks had that same thing. This is not gilded in the back because they were used on the altar. You would not have seen the back. We're on our way to the dining room, but as we go through the entry to the house, which is rather small, but we think it has impact and it's kind of a work in progress. We feel like we want to do some other additional work on the walls. But of particular note in here is the tiger carpet that runs up the stairs from Patterson Flynn Martin. It's done by a French mill. It's 39 inches in width, so it is a very vintage kind of carpet. And I upholstered the banisters with a linen velvet, which happens to be one of my favorite fabrics, and of course the silk tassels from Brunswick. I happen to adore tassels and any kind of trimming. I think if I had a dog, I'd probably trim it. But this floor, again, is the slate and marble that was put in by the person that built the house. And it gives you almost a sense of an 18th century French chateau. The chandelier is kind of fun. We felt the porcelain flowers with the wood basket gave the entry some character. And of particular note here is a painting that was given to us by a friend, and it's a painting of oranges, and of course we are in Orange, Virginia. So it has a great meaning to us, as does the friend, and of course the painting that she gave to us. My background is in interior design, and I have always loved doing interiors and so forth. I skewed away from that for a bit and was involved in doing furniture showrooms, which is basically still design. At one point, I was Vice President and Creative Director for Schumacher Fabrics. So that related to the home, obviously. And since fabric and color are my passion, that was a wonderful point in my career. And then I bounced back to interior design. Which I do love. I love doing it for myself and I love doing it for clients. And one of the greatest satisfactions of doing people's homes is when they tell you how much they love it or they love a particular corner in their room that they spend their time in with their, reading a book and having a glass of wine.
I started my career in New York and went through the Bloomingdale's buying program and spent 5 years in New York, and then randomly on a lark, got accepted to the Sorbonne and ended up at the Sorbonne for a year studying French and then another year at the École du Louvre. Came back to New York and serendipitously landed at Condé Nast as a party and style editor for 6.5 years, where I wrote two weekly columns for HFN magazine. And then I started my textile company, and we now work on interior design. And in the meantime, I also wrote a book for Rizzoli, An Invitation to the Garden, on entertaining in our garden in Kinderhook. Welcome to the dining room. This is one of our favorite rooms in the house. When we moved in, we thought we would do something rather unusual in that we only light the dining room with candlelight. So the chandelier is candles, and it takes about 22 candles for a dinner party, which makes us very grateful that we have IKEA's candles to use because the box of 50 is so inexpensive. We've set the table with various things we've collected, the salt cellars and the pepper shakers. The birds are all things that we've found along life's journey. The fabric is actually a fabric that I designed for my hand-printed textile collection, and it's called Orangerie. The dinnerware is a beautiful pattern called Charlotte, which is based on one of my fabric patterns, and it's hand-painted in France by Marie Dage, and as is the Thomas dinner plate, which coordinates back to the Thomas fabric that we do for the collection. The napkins are really interesting in that they're the typical linen damask napkins that pretty much everybody has in their house or have inherited from their grandmothers, but we dyed them with Rit dye to give them a new lease on life. The flowers are all from the garden. When we were very fortunate in that we inherited a rather significant collection of historic daffodils. So we have a wealth of varieties of daffodils, and these are Euphorbia Caracus rufii that were also grow in the garden, and that's a great plant. It looks fantastic all year and is very generous and self-sows itself all over the place, which makes it a very welcome friend in the garden. The walls, when we moved in and saw the house, I thought, we were sort of debating about what we should do about the walls, and I had offhandedly told Thomas that I would paint the walls and do a mural. Well, it took a while to get the mural together, but I finally did this winter. So this was my winter project, which was rather a nice project because I'd be in here every morning painting while I had the light with a fire going and a cup of tea. And the councils are a pair. We had them in our Gramercy apartment. Thomas had found them on a trip to Italy years ago, so we're very happy to have found a new place for them in the house. And the color is Bougainvillea by Resource Paint. It's a really striking color, and it's a color that I think works very well in the room with the floor and the marble mantle. The mantle is from a historic house in Richmond. It was salvage, as is the floor. The wall sconces are from Nerman Weeks. We had these in our dining room in Gramercy Park, as is the cobalt mirror is an antique that Thomas found on a trip, I believe, to Sweden. These we found together last summer in France when we were at Porte de Valme Flea Market. We fell upon those and just had to have them. And then on the table we also have vases from our travels. The small vases with the daffodils are from Petersham's in Richmond, which is a fantastic nursery. If you ever happen to be in Richmond, England, I highly recommend a day trip out there to see that, and maybe Ham House, which is not too far away. And then I also recommend a lunch at their Michelin star restaurant, which was a real treat. A friend of ours took us there when we were visiting a few years ago. When we're entertaining, I'm often envious of Thomas because since I cook, I am obviously get to spend more time in the kitchen than he does, and he gets to spend the time with the guests. When we moved into the house, the original dining room was the library because they had added on the kitchen in the early 2000s. But when we moved in, we decided we wanted to make this the dining room. And it's a beautiful room. We love this room. But the issue happens to be that the dining room is quite a distance from the kitchen, so I get to hear all the laughter while I'm in the kitchen getting everything ready to bring out. And I get a little, like I said, I get a little bit jealous of Thomas for that, for having that privilege. So speaking of the kitchen, let me show you just how far it is to the kitchen. And now we're walking through the hyphen, which connects the older part of the house with the relatively newer part of the house. And this is a great space because it transitions. We used one of my wallpapers called Millbrook on the walls, which I had designed with the idea for another house that we ended up obviously not buying. The curtains were ones that I designed and used a design from John Fowler, from Colfax and Fowler, because we wanted to have that sort of John Fowler, Nancy Lancaster reference in our house in Virginia, since she's from Charlottesville. The collection in the corner cabinets, which were part of the house when we bought it, is Mulberry, and that's a collection that Thomas had acquired over the course of his travels. Follow me and let's go to the kitchen. I think the soul of a house, it comes from the owners of the house and their collections and their personalities and their imprint on the rooms and how they arrange a table, how they arrange the flowers, whatever that may be, as whatever they think is their vision. That's what gives the house the character and that sort of joie de vivre.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I think that the way we approach everything when we're just even ourselves, having dinner by candlelight, and it's what our passion is. Our passion is perfection, which can sometimes be very daunting.
Well, my passion isn't perfection. No one's ever accused me of that.
No, that's true. That would be my category.
That's your circus, not mine.
Yes, when Michael leaves the room, I go in after him and fluff a little bit more. But yes, anyway, one of us has a passion.
It's a very
but you
good.
do all the cooking.
It's yin yang, And we have separate domains. I think that's been the secret in the sauce for the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. Here we are in the kitchen. This was added in the early 2000s, and it's got amazing light because of the 3 skylights. And then also the views out onto the garden are pretty wonderful too. It makes it a very inviting, airy, light room. When we moved in, I realized that we really didn't have enough storage for our pots and pans. So I found this fantastic rack, and it's the most amazing thing because I can see exactly which pot and pan and where they are, and it makes life a lot easier than searching for them in the bottom of a cabinet. We have part of our glassware collection. Since we do a lot of entertaining, we have a lot of glasses. This is the tea and coffee bar that we have set up, and we use that every day, all day long. The tiles are, I had seen the photos of Monet's kitchen in Giverny for years, and then finally in 2017 we took a visit to Giverny, and I absolutely fell in love with them and had to have them in my dream kitchen. So in 2021, we made the journey to the little tile factory that Monet had used, which is Ponchon in Ponchon, France. And it's when Monet would have bought the tiles, it was a group of 7 factories. And now it's one small atelier with an amazing artist who is keeping the tradition alive. So these are all hand painted. And we did a custom glaze, so they really tie into the ones that Monet had in his kitchen. And then we were also able to do a portrait of the house in the center. And since the name of the house is Oakton, we have the oak leaves to the upper left. And since we have so many squirrels, which in my opinion now are really tiny terrorists, we did a portrait of the squirrel. And then Thomas can talk about the renovation that we did in here.
Yes, we did a simple renovation. Well, maybe it wasn't so simple, but The cabinets were originally kind of a light honey color, and we decided we wanted to get them painted, so we used a floor paint from Resource. And a floor paint on cabinets gives you a lot of durability and so forth, because if you think of it in terms of putting it on a floor, you can walk on it. We don't walk on our cabinets, but they do get some use, so the floor paint does help. We added the curtains behind the glass doors since we inherited the cabinets, and we really didn't want to see what's inside of them. Cabinets can get messy, so it's just, I think it gives it a nice cleaner look. We installed the butcher block counters, which I think give a nice warmth to them, replace the hardware, replace the marble that was here. There was a granite here, and it just all looks much lighter and brighter. And as Michael said, with all the light coming in from the skylights, it's a very pleasant room to work in. Although Michael's the one that primarily works in the kitchen, I do the cleanup. But anyway, the look of the room is just very sort of casual country. There's a needlepoint cushion on one of the chairs that Michael did. It's a cabbage, so that has kind of interest adds some interest to the kitchen. Some artwork and pieces that we've picked up over the years, obviously sort of kitchen related. The cabbage, the grapes, the still life, the naturemort, and more vegetables and so forth. Here we have a few pieces of Majolica that are scattered through the house, a couple of plates at the top there, some pitchers sitting on the counter. The sconces that we have on this stone wall, it's stone and brick, it's very rustic sconce that I bought years ago in Milan and had used them in various locations, and they seem to be the most perfect here. Above the armoire is a painting that a dear friend of ours gave us. We admired it, and she had inherited many pieces from this artist, and she gifted that to us, and it has very special meaning. And it has a bit more of a modern look than most of the artwork in our house. But then it's combined with our collection of blue and white. I guess by now you understand that we do love blue and white. Several of these pieces were purchased in Paris recently, and combined it with a few white stoneware pitchers and so forth.
So we really rely on what's growing in the garden. So since we're in Virginia, we pretty much have something out there 12 months out of the year. The winter is obviously much more driven by leeks and parsnips and rutabagas and lettuces, whereas in the spring and summer and fall we have wealth of great produce that we can just go out the back door and pick. And that drives all the menus and what we eat. So we eat very seasonally.
I think as far as when we start looking at designing the home and so forth, we really seem to gravitate towards very similar things. We seem to agree on most things. There are those occasions that we might disagree or look at things differently, but we pretty much have the same eye. If we go to an antique show or an antique shop, it seems like we'll both gravitate to one thing. It's very uncanny. So we really had an easy time doing the house. There are a couple things that might not have been so easy, but I think overall it's been good.
Well, you know, and we don't really argue ever, which is great. But if we do hit an impasse in the process, we just stop until we can sort of, and then it just doesn't get done really. No. That's the way that works.
And here we are in our library, which is probably the most used room in the house. It has a certain warmth, not only in the wintertime, but also throughout the year. We use the fireplace constantly. We also have a small dining area in here that we have dinner. many nights, and we will also entertain in this room. This is a room that sort of everyone that comes to the house gravitates to. The color of the walls just kind of envelops the room with this wonderful sort of blue-green, sort of almost an undescribable color, and takes on different feelings as the light changes and so forth. One of the biggest things in the room is our collection of Russian Impressionistic paintings, as you will see throughout the room on both sides of the fireplace. They're here on either side of the doorway. There's some interspersed in the bookcases. These were things that I started collecting. I had a particular affinity to them. They sort of remind me of my background, and I particularly love some of them are unfinished, and they come from various different artists. All of them are signed on the back, which is rather unusual for most artwork, and I put lucite on the back so you could read the signatures. The room is anchored by an antique Ushak rug, which was originally purchased for our Gramercy Park apartment. It has wonderful colors and rather unusual for an Ushak. The browns and the greens and the golds, and it's very rich. And the sofa was custom made that we've had for years, and it's upholstered in what is one of my favorite fabrics. It's an Italian linen velvet, which just wears like iron, and as it gets older, it just mellows, and it has this wonderful shading effect to it. And you can see how it varies with the way the light hits it and so forth. And on the sofa are a collection of needlepoint pillows. Some of the pillows like this and the two on the end there were done by Michael. The other ones are antique needlepoint pillows.
Particularly all the garden books have almost all been read cover to cover by me over the last 10 years or so. And certainly all the French novels have from when I lived in Paris and was at the Sorbonne. So I have, and even after, obviously, I lived in Paris, I've continued to read in French. So yes, all of those. And then that section is sort of the to be read section. But yes, the books are constantly on and off the shelves. And use them as reference we use them for reference for design work, for the garden, for just the pleasure of looking at them, really, for enjoying the photography, enjoying the ideas.
And I would have to say that the section that has most appeal to me are the decorating books that we have a large collection of, that I'm a little bit more apt to read those than the garden books, which is Michael's category, or the cookbooks on this side, which is his category. But all in through here, different designers that we've collected through the years, and they're great reference books. I mean, some evenings we'll just sit and just pull a whole bunch of them and sit in the chaise and just spend the night flipping through beautiful rooms. The bus in the room I purchased at an antique show in Southampton, and in those days there was a big outdoor antique show, and these were just sitting on the ground, and I had to have them. They obviously are not very mobile, and I had to have obviously had them delivered to the apartment, and I had these pedestals. And when I told the man to put the bus on the pedestals, he refused because he said those busts will collapse, those pedestals. So I had to have the pedestals reinforced with a new base and so forth, and they have stood their time in Gramercy, and now they're standing their time in our library in Orange. And the busts are made of marble and bronze, which obviously makes them extremely heavy. As you notice in this room, we have a lot of pattern and color. And the thing when mixing patterns together, you have to look at the individual piece. Like this piece over here, the chaise has a lot of pattern, but if you put something like this right on top of it, it might look a bit confusing. You have to think of things separate in the room as individual pieces, and how do they relate to the wall, how do they relate to the floor, and in this particular case, the toile ties into the brown, this chair ties into the green of the carpet, as does the sofa and the chair that we did in the same velvet. The pattern of all of the pillows, again, contrasts against a solid background. So again, I think if the sofa had a lot of pattern on it, it might be too much. And I think that having the dark green as a background, it just gives you this individual piece and their individual moments. The moment here where you have the tapestry on the wall, again, some pattern, but it's separated by wall color, it's separated by the table and chairs, and that makes for a particular, almost separate area in the room as a separate dining area.
How did we meet?
How did we meet?
It's rather a classic story. We met across a crowded room. We were in Chicago 25 years ago in this April, and at a color conference and for work, and I had gotten to the conference opening remarks late, and I had to sit in the balcony, and I looked down amongst, 600-700 heads, and I saw Thomas and thought, my, he looks cute. So, and then we ended up in a small breakout room with on our little committee that we were working on at 10 people, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting for this one person, which now, 25 years later, I know why we were waiting, because Thomas has a terrible sense of direction. And in walked Thomas, and that's it. 25 years later, here we are.
Across the table, those blue eyes were just staring at me. What could I do? And here we are. I guess it worked.
Every day's been bliss. Let's go in the sunroom. And now we're in the sunroom. This is the one room in the house that probably had the biggest change since we moved in. When we moved in, there were bookcases on all three walls. The French doors were closed off with a bookcase in front of them. And then we opened that back up, took out all the bookcases. The walls are lime washed in a pale, pale pink to complement the red and oranges in the bricks. The floor is brick, which is a fantastic floor for a plant room because if water gets on it, it's low maintenance. The pieces of furniture are pieces that we found. We found this chair at auction, and we found this East Lake chaise at Brimfield, Massachusetts, at the flea market there. Both of them are covered in my Walton fabric, which is hand printed. And then the mirror we found in the Finger Lakes at a little antique store hidden away in the back corner. And it's an interesting melange of bits and bobs and shells and a little cameo on the top. So it's a really fun piece. The plants are in here for the season. They're as anxious to get outside as I am to get them outside, which should be happening in about another week or two. The wire plant stand is a plant stand that we actually found at a flea market in the Finger Lakes at Madison Bachville years ago, and it's the perfect piece for in here. This little table and chairs, the chairs we actually bought at auction for a house that we were absolutely certain we were going to buy and did not buy. So there you have it. But fortunately, these chairs worked in this house, so we were able to paint them and use them in the sunroom. And then the French doors were a big project because we had to knock through the wall and have the doors custom made.
And one of the things that Michael didn't point out are the two chandeliers that were in the house. They were not in this room. There was, I think, recessed lighting in here. But they're really quite fanciful. They almost look like icing on a cake if you look very close to the way the bronze comes over the bowl of the chandelier. and they were in two different rooms in the house, and we sort of put them in here. And on these brackets are these really fanciful, they are vases actually, that were given to us by our dear friends in New York. So let's go and check out the rest of the house. So before we go upstairs, let's check out the powder room. This was actually a full bath, and we really use it as a powder room for our guests. So what we did is there's a full shower behind here, and we added these doors to conceal the shower, and they're upholstered in a beautiful Fortuny fabric, which happens to be one of my favorite patterns, and also Fortuny is one of the loves of my fabrics. The walls were done by Michael, where you see there a shaded shade of green. They're all sort of antiqued and washed. And in here we also have a collection of French garden gates in the sepia tones. What I did, since it's always hard to find tissue box holders, I actually decoupaged this myself to have that same sort of black and white feeling. These are drawings of Michelangelo. And we also added the monkey sconces, which I think give a little bit of a whimsical touch to the powder room. The sitting monkeys at the window, and we also use these little guest towels with monkeys on them. So you get a bit of a theme without getting too carried away. We added the piece of furniture here, and the dark wood against the green walls gives a certain richness. This is the old Paris Opera, and then we have an Italian piece above it. When Michael said that we were looking at houses in Virginia, I thought he was actually crazy. I said, why Virginia? We've never been there.
I'd been there.
Or he had been there, and I just thought it was a little absurd, but came down and fell in love with Virginia, and obviously fell in love with the house that we ended up buying. So I guess in the long run, he was right.
Well, we also have to credit our friend Charlotte Moss, because we had been at a cocktail party that she was hosting for another friend, Margot Shaw, for her book, Flower. And I'd asked Charlotte about Orange, Virginia, and her response was so overwhelming positive that's what I think got onboarded Thomas to the idea, because really it was completely random and absurd for us to be looking in Virginia, because we had no connection to the area at all. 5 years later, I can say we have great connections to the area and have great friends here.
We do indeed.
Let's head upstairs. Now we're in the primary bedroom. This is a fantastic room. It has light on three sides. Since it didn't really have a full wall to place the bed on, we're floating the bed in the center, and we're flanking it with two screens that we covered in mohair velvet. And we have a collection of bits and bobs that we've acquired over the years that just each reflect our own personalities, and they're very different on either side of the bed. The chair under the window, it's one of a pair, and it's in one of my fabrics that I custom printed in the Gramercy pattern. The two chairs in front of the fireplace are two that we found in Woodstock, Vermont, in a little antique store. And then we had the tremendous good fortune of finding a very large curtain panel made out of this beautiful Jean Monroe hand-printed fabric. And it even had the little ruched trim on the lead edge of the curtain. So when we had these redone, we reused the trim and added the gathered piping on the cord around the back of the chair and along the front edge of the seat. The needlepoint ottoman was my COVID project. I did that in Berlin work, and I followed an 1840s charted pattern, so it was not a painted pattern on a canvas, but I counted all the stitches. So that was, COVID was a long period, you know, that lockdown, so needed something to do. So that was the project. Originally started life as a rug, but Thomas decided that it needed to be an ottoman, that he didn't want to use it as a rug. We have another collection of blue and white that we've acquired, just bits and bobs. This is a painting that we found in upstate New York in a little antique shop. These bronze lamps are rather special. Thomas just found these years ago at an antique store in High Point. The finials are particularly lovely. The bed hangings are made from one of my fabrics, Thomas, and the pattern's Thomas, and we custom printed it in the blue on cream linen and linen and silk ground cloth. And the interior is lined with a coordinating green damask fabric. And the hellebores are from the garden. This is my side, so it has a bit of a different theme to it.
Okay, now we are in our dressing area, which this area has a particular fondness for me, since I actually upholstered all the walls, covered all the doors, and even covered the moldings with a antique linen velvet. So it just gives a wonderful, almost jewel box-like feeling. It's a great background for small bits of artwork and things that we've collected over the years. There's a collection of menswear that were ads for a French magazine. And this is pretty much the area that all of our closets are in. This also transitions into the guest bedroom, which also the guest bedroom has an entrance from the other end of the house. What the word home means to me is a place that you can put yourself in, surround yourself with things that are so personal to you that you enjoy just sitting and looking at them. You enjoy them. Home is where we enjoy each other, where we enjoy our friends, and it really is a sanctuary to get away from the world. No matter what's going on, when you're at home, you're surrounded by your environment, and no one can touch you at that point. It's you.
Yes, I don't know that I could elaborate on that any better.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.